I'm Corinne Schaefer, and welcome to Create Outside the Box. In this episode, we will be speaking with dancer, performer, and actor Leeroy Boone about coming from an artistic family, keeping motivated in your craft, and his move from ballet to the West End. If you're interested in watching our podcast, please visit our Creative Operations YouTube channel under the playlist Create Outside the Box. Born in France, Leeroy Boone started his dance education at the Regional Conservatoire in Toulouse before furthering his education through the VM Dance Studio and later joining the Paris Opera Ballet School. He went on to finalize his professional training at the Ballettschule des Hamburg Ballet. During his dance training, Leeroy participated in several performances at the Palais Garnier as a guest dancer with the Bundesjugendballett, as well as the Gala Yaruskaya at the Bolshoi Academy. Upon graduation, he joined the Hamburg Ballet John Neuermeyer, in which he remained for 5 years, gaining high-level professional experience through the ensemble, as well as soloist roles and taking part in the company's acclaimed tours. In the midst of his professional ballet career, Leeroy furthered his education through summer intensives at NYU, Steinhardt for vocal performance, Laria for acting, and through private study. He is a recent graduate of the Musical Theatre Company at the Royal Academy of Music in London, and is currently starring in the new West End production of The Phantom of the Opera in the role of the Slave Master. So hello and welcome, Leeroy Boone, to Create Outside the Box. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Corinne. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm trying to think like how we met, I think was fate. We would have met eventually somehow because we had multiple connections.
That's true.
One was through a mutual friend, Sarah Azell, who you danced.
Was on the show, right?
Mm-hmm. She was on the show, and she was also our assistant director and choreographer for the Alice in Wonderland videos, and you danced together in Hamburg.
Absolutely. We were in the Hamburg Ballet together for a couple of years, and she was with the junior ballet just before, so I also got to see her at that time. But I have to say, your initiative was what got us close, because I don't think I would have made one and one. I wouldn't have added the thoughts of seeing you at TAP and you being Sarah's friend. I wouldn't have had that, social smarts that you have.
Yeah, it was funny because it was Sarah, but as you just brought up, you were in my TAP class. And
that's right.
I'm sure people listening are like, wait, Corinne Schaefer is in a TAP class with a professional ballet dancer. How does this make sense?
And she's better than him, a lot better than him.
No, but it was great. Like you were sometimes coming to TAP, and we all got like a kick out of having professional ballet dancers in our TAP class. So it was either through TAP or Sarah. We were going to get together at some point.
Yeah.
And then through that, I think we started talking about you getting involved in the Alice in Wonderland video. You were in the Queen of Hearts video. You've since recorded several demos of Cheshire Cat for us. Which
yes, I have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we love you as Cheshire Cat. And and then also in Hamburg, you were part of Opera on Tap when we did a Sondheim.
That's right. That's true. Yes. That was kind of, it's funny because all of that is very fateful to me in a way. Sondheim being such a big part of musical theater, and for that to be sort of one of my first initiations to singing on stage. I hadn't, before Opera on Tap, I hadn't sung on stage for maybe about 10 years. So I did things when I was a teenager with my mom and like her artistic endeavors, but I hadn't been on stage singing for a while until you offered Opera on Tap. And it's funny because that day when I went to our TAP class, my mom had told me, you should get yourself out there if you want to sing more. And that's the night you offered for me to participate. and I was listening to a Sondheim song on the way. I mean, it was just the stars aligned. And then at Opera on Tap, where Guido Gottenbos was also participating, he's the one who told me about the Royal Academy of Music, which I later on decided to join and got accepted to. So it was all sort of really, it all just sort of aligned, and it's really funny how that all made such an impact on my, on my journey.
Yeah, I think it's great because oftentimes we think that success is made up with really big dramatic steps. And sometimes it's just like really small stuff, like having a conversation after a tap class, or having a conversation with your mom that, inspires you to take action, or singing in a bar in Hamburg some Sondheim music and getting to talk to other colleagues who, have ideas or have different connections to offer to you.
Right. I mean, it's true, it's those little nudges, but it's also, you also have to take the leap in a certain sense. Just like I was saying, you came up to me at our tap class and you're like, hi, just by the way, I know Sarah Ezel, you work with her, and I would have maybe not thought of doing that. And the same with Guido, it was like, oh, can I ask you about, just taking the step, because I'm a huge introvert, so sometimes going up to strangers or semi-strangers or people that you admire or you look up to and going to ask for information or for advice can be very intimidating for me. So going up to him and being like, hey, I find your journey very inspiring, and how did you get there, and what advice would you have for a young, baritone singer? Well, how can I get to where you are, in a way? And so taking that leap and just going up for it and asking out and coming up with the initiative is also what creates these little sparks of fate.
Yeah, exactly. So you've taken a lot of leaps in your life, but I kind of want to start at the beginning of everything. You mentioned your mom. You come from a very artistic family, multiple generations in the arts. How did that? Yeah, how did that inspire you to get into the arts? How did that help you make a decision about what career in the arts you wanted? And I guess the other question too is, having multiple generations of family in the arts, did that help you get a perspective of how to navigate the ups and downs and what the career actually is versus the shiny version of what we all think it is?
It's really funny. So both my parents are actors in France, and they do a lot of theater. My mom has done a lot of work with children and for children. She's created her own shows for years that she toured. And she's performed for thousands of little kids, from something like 3-year-old up to like maybe 10 or something. So that was a big chunk of her career. And my dad is more of a physical actor, so he's also danced in his education, and that dance background is very important for him. And so I grew up in that environment, and I grew up with their friends and talking about theater and going to see theater, and so that was really, and being backstage with them, and because I was a terrible child, they had to give me things to do backstage, because otherwise I would poke my head under the curtain or whatever. So I grew up in the midst of that world, and so in a way, I've never been able to imagine doing anything else than something related to the stage, and it's just part of my DNA, and that's what's funny about your other question about being prepared for the ups and downs. It's really more like that's all I know. I've seen my parents sort of going through all of that and struggle, and have months where and years where they worked so much and they were so fulfilled and they were really excited about the work they were doing, and then months and years where they had a lot less to do and where they were worried about making ends meet and staying creative and finding ways to make their projects happen. So that in a way is what I know. And I went to therapy when I was about 13, because, being a teenager and trying to navigate life as a teenager is tough for everybody. And being a queer artist kid was also difficult in that sense as well. So my therapist one day told me, I think your expectations about life are too high because you grew up in theater and you grew up in the arts and you think that everything is gonna be shiny and amazing and perfect and dreamy. And I went home and I had to think about it a lot. And it was only until later when I talked to my parents where they were like, but no, he was totally wrong. You know that it's not that. So in a way, it was surprising for me to have his perspective of that's what kids in the arts are supposed to feel like it's all shiny and perfect. And that had never stricken me that that's what it should be. That's what it is for other people. But I guess I tried to stay away from the uncertainty of that life by being in a ballet company, which is, 1 year renewable contract where you're part of an ensemble, and Hamburg is a repertoire company, so you do a lot of different things all year long, a lot of different productions. You go to a lot of different cities, and you have this variety while having the security of having, a contract that keeps you with the company for a while. And I thought that was sort of my saving grace. Oh, I'm not gonna be like my parents, running from job to job and trying to fend for yourself. But somehow there was something missing, and there was something missing in my creative life. I found myself being quite complacent about what I got to do and where my career was going, and not really having a say because you're part of a bigger structure and a lot of things are decided for you by the nature of how the structure works. And so this new chapter of my life that I'm now is exciting because I get to say, ooh, I would really like to try this out, or my interest takes me there, and so we'll see what happens if I go in that direction, which is really exciting.
It is really exciting. And I want to kind of, dissect the journey a little bit. I just want to circle back to, first off, how wonderful it was that while you were going through a difficult time as a teenager, again, everyone has their personal journey, everyone has tough transitions, but how wonderful it was that you were able to, get support, and that your family was supportive of you getting support and having, a foundation early on in that it's okay to get, to get help, and that your emotional health is just as important as your physical health. So that's great.
Absolutely.
And then also, it was funny when you were talking about the therapist's take on what the perspective of someone in the arts, especially a child of the arts, would be. I don't think that artists think that everything should be shiny and perfect, but I do think that artists, because they tend to be visionary, that we're hopeful. It's not that we think things are perfect all the time, but we strive to see where the world can be, and we're optimistic that we can bring it there. So maybe he was catching on to the optimism of no, I want to strive to make something beautiful. And that's not about things being perfect all the time, but it is about having hope. And I think I think that's what people need. But anyway, how did you originally get into ballet? Because your parents are not ballet dancers. So what brought you into ballet, and what do you love about ballet?
I think that was very much my trying to find my own voice in the performing arts. And I don't know, there was something about dancing that felt very necessary to me. I needed to express myself with my body from a very early age. I can't really put my finger on it. It came as something that was quite obvious again. My godfather was a dancer with the Harlem Dance Theater of Harlem in New York. And I always had this sort of image of professional male ballet dancer. So that was sort of like a distant example, a distant figure of what it could be. And yeah, I don't really know what it was. But then as I kept going, there was something about striving for an ideal against this sort of continuous research of perfection and perfecting yourself and making yourself, a better human in a way, trying to achieve this ideal that is the perfect ballet technique, the perfect ballet body, this perfect sort of unattainable shape that you can be in if you work hard enough at ballet. So I think that's what kept me going, is that there was an objective that you could fulfill if you worked hard enough. There were very clear rules to the game, and so I think it kind of gave me a shape for that hope and for that aspiration to perfection that I have, and that I think a lot of artists have. So I think that's what kept me going with ballet, and that's what inspired me from the beginning on. And I think that's also, in a funny way, that's also what makes me distance myself from it now. The fact that it's this very finite ideal. There isn't very much room for personality, creativity within the strict boundaries of ballet. And I think there's a part of me who finds that that rigor and the demands of ballet technique a little bit too high a price to pay in my own life and for my own body. But there's also something about the restraints of having to be this clean and having to be, when you dance when you dance ballet, it has to be a certain way, it has to be clean, it has to, tick all the boxes, and it's very contriving to me. It's turned out to be very contriving to me as I progressed.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we both come from classical art backgrounds, ballet, opera. And as you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, because in the beginning, because it's so clear in what it's expecting of you. There is like a path that you need to follow. There are boxes you need to check. So that structure in the beginning is helpful because it serves as kind of this roadmap of things that you can achieve. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, that's great. And it's interesting to me because I do think that there's part of artists where we don't ever stop challenging ourselves. So I'm not going to say that challenging yourself or striving is a bad thing. But what becomes a bad thing is the quest for perfection. And how do we separate the quest for perfection with just, quality and the exploration of the wonders of what our bodies can do? Mm-hmm. And that can be the dangerous thing. It's like trying to be perfect, trying to cram yourself into this little box. No, but like, how do we still keep the quality and the exceptionalism of what we do to high standards? And that, I think, is what's so challenging. And then also feeling like you were saying, there's a lack of exploration and creativity then because it's only one way, or it's only for whoever you're working for. They might also have a specific vision of what's right and wrong. And you kind of feel like, well, wait a second, I'm losing myself and my own creative voice in striving to be the definition of what this perfection is.
I feel like a lot of that comes to how you teach these classical forms and how you encourage students and young and people, young or old, that come to these art forms, how you encourage them to look for their own voice and how to make it work for their own bodies, and especially for ballet. And I'm guessing from the upper perspective, it's probably kind of the same. The teachers in big institutions have these quotas to fill in a way, and have these very specific ideals they reach for, and this very specific image for their institution they look for. And so there's a culture of pass or discard that is a little bit entertained there. And I'm sure there are ways to achieve the same ideals of quality and of high technical education, while keeping an eye on nourishing students, nourishing especially young people who are still forming their personalities and forming their taste and forming their their ideas and their ideals, and making sure you encourage them to look outside the box as well as within the confines of the technique you are teaching them, and encouraging them to see that even if you don't have all the box checked within the institution, there are so many things that you can bring in to keep being rich and juicy as an artist.
Well, and that's the problem, is that you lose part of the artist sometimes in this. They would often joke with certain institutions calling it the factory, because you had so many people coming in and learning this technique and being churned out into the world. But if there's always such a quest for perfection, then you've got a lot of people that are kind of in the same cookie cutter image of each other, because they have been taught to repress what makes them unique. And the audience wants unique. The audience wants authenticity. So you have to figure out, like, okay, yes, we need to impart this technique. And yes, we have to make sure that there's a certain standard of quality that's maintained in these art forms. But we still need artists who are allowed to express themselves individually. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, why have the art form? We can design robots to do things perfectly. Humans are not designed to be perfect all the time.
Right.
So from ballet, before we get into your journey and transition into musical theater and theater, what were some of the companies that you worked with, and what were some of the collaborations that you enjoyed?
So it's funny, because I turned around from ballet pretty quickly. So I really only got to work with the Hamburg Ballet extensively, and with the Bundesjugendballet a little bit, while I was still in formation at the Hamburg Ballet School. There was something really, really great that we did with the Bundesjugendballet, which was called Bewegt, and it was a project with something like 300 children from schools around Hamburg, and I was one of the few students to be chosen to go and help the choreographer, Christopher Weinstein-Story, to teach the children in the schools the choreography, and to help them develop the work. And that was really great, because you could see how everybody could come to the art form, and we performed in the Kampnagel fabric, and there was something great about seeing how the stage can be part of everyday life, because they brought to the stage their own universe and the way they behaved with each other, which is very real, very natural, very normal, because they were really kids from all strands of society, and it was really fun to see how they brought themselves to the art form, and how they took the art form into their life, and also the joy that you can have doing these things, because we do call it play. We play. I play a character. I play an instrument. And at the end of the day, that's what it is. And these children remind you always what it is to play. That was very rich. And what I enjoyed most about being in the Hamburg Ballet were the tours. Being able to go to Asia and to America and to Europe at large was just the richest thing, because it allowed me to see different places with from a very active point of view. I think there's something really cool about discovering a city while working in the city. It gives you really a sort of pedestrian, included vision of the city as opposed to only sightseeing and only sort of wandering in the streets. So I think those are the highlights of having been a ballet dancer.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were speaking earlier about how, artists are striving. We're striving to create a vision and to storytell and to be the best version of ourselves. That being said, you were performing professionally as a ballet dancer full time. And to a lot of people, they were like, okay, I've made it. I've got my job. I'm on stage. I'm where I want to be. I'm good with the routine. I'm good with the rehearsals. I'm good with everything. But you continue to do this, like on top of your full performance schedule, we're taking singing lessons, taking acting lessons. You were in my tap class. What motivates you to keep striving, and also in like multiple disciplines? Like, what motivates you to keep exploring and not be complacent?
There's a quote I came across, I can't remember who it's from, but that it said, be so good they can't ignore you. So that, I think, in a way is because I'm a very ambitious person. There are a lot of things that I want to do and I want to be able to do, because I realize a lot of these high profile roles that I want to be able to portray, or the very difficult material that comes with it, that demands a very high level of abilities. And first of all, the abilities that I have acquired as a dancer are not a given. You need to keep at it. And that's true for all the other forms of techniques, singing technique especially. That's something I came to quite late, but it's something that I will never be done with either. And that's what's also very exciting, because the voice, like every other part of the body, evolves and will grow and sort of and will age as well. So there's something really exciting for me about, keeping on going at your craft and at the techniques that you learn, and learning new techniques to find better ways and safer ways and healthier ways to do the things you already know how to do. But also just because there are such ideals that are put out there for us to be inspired by, whether it be, performers that you see or that you have videos of from earlier times, or you can look at these people and think, how do they get there? I think that's what I do a lot. I look at people and I'm like, how did they become so good?
Yeah.
And one of the answers that I'm finding for myself is they kept learning things. They kept developing, and they kept searching. And so I think that's what motivates me to keep working at things that are out of my comfort zone and that challenge me, because I think that's how I make the most progress. There's something terribly humbling when you've reached a certain level in one discipline to go into something you have very little idea about and become a beginner again and be taught the basics and struggle with the basics when you're doing professional level things in your field. And it's great because it makes you look at what you know how to do in a different way as well. It makes you think, oh, I had forgotten what the baby steps are. And it makes you value what you already know, all the while questioning it and allowing yourself to see what more can be done and what can be done differently.
So from striving and taking all of these classes to making a conscious decision of, I want to switch gears. I want to try something different. Like you said, I'm going to start with these baby steps, and I'm going to try and get to a professional level in a completely different performing arts field. So you went from professional ballet dancer, and then you're like, I want to go into theater and musical theater. What made you want to take that transition? What was that transition like?
It was a long process. I I spent a lot of time weighing the aspects of my life that I was really happy about with the aspects of my life that I wasn't happy about in Hamburg. And a lot of it, Hamburg Ballet was a dream to me. Working with John Neumeier was a lifelong dream. And so getting to work with him all year round was supposedly the best thing that could ever happen to me. And then when it came to the everyday, the day-to-day, struggle of life, somehow that dream got tarnished a little bit, and I started looking at things that I wanted to do differently, or the things that I was missing, the things that I wasn't allowed to do, or that I wasn't given, or all these things, because we always want more, because I always want more. And so the choice was also, do I just want to maybe change companies and explore a different style of dance and work in a different city as a dancer? And somehow what interested me the most in John's work was the storytelling, and his adaptations of novels like Anna Karenina, or of plays like As You Like It, Romeo and Juliet, The Seagull. There were so many of these great works of literature that he adapted to the stage and to ballet. And those were the things that thrilled me the most when I worked in Hamburg Ballet. So I thought maybe the time is ripe to go more into that direction, in the direction of storytelling and in the direction of literature, because I am a huge lover of literature. But the real decision to sort of give everything up in Hamburg and pursue different dreams was terribly scary. And the first thing I did is a summer intensive in New York. I went to NYU and did a summer intensive for vocal study at Steinhardt. And for 2 weeks, I sang every day. I went to see Broadway shows, and I, did tap and jazz and, scene study. And I needed nothing more. I was so happy with that schedule. And I realized that I wasn't missing ballet that much during these 2 weeks. And I could imagine my life being that. So little by little, the decision of giving up some of the things that I had in my Hamburg ballet career, ballet life, and pursue those dreams became more and more clear. And somehow the decision just made itself at some point. I had a discussion with John, and basically my vision for myself and for my career wasn't the same that he had for me within his company. And so that was really, my dad told me, so what are you waiting for? Go for it, do it. And really there was nothing else to explore, and nothing else to look for in my Hamburg life. And I just went for it.
Exactly. And I like that you were explaining that it was a gradual process, that it was through, really taking these classes, exploring things, then the path gradually became clear. And you know what? It's okay to outgrow things sometimes. It's okay to have multiple lives in one life. I think the hardest thing for a lot of artists is we have a love for an art form, but our ideal and love of an art form, and it in its actual everyday as a job industry, are sometimes two very different things. And that can be a strange wake-up call to an artist that has dedicated a large part of their life in pursuit of something. And then you get there and you're like, I still love this art form, but I don't know if this fits me in all of the ways that I want it to fit me as far as like my life,
Sure.
And it's okay to question that. And it's okay to look for things that are better fit. And that is not, I think what people think then is like, oh, is this a failure? Is there something wrong with me? And no, you know, and allow yourself to explore. I think also with some of these classical disciplines, you know, I know an amazing pianist. I mean, we're talking wins competitions pianist. And at the time, she was studying at a music school in Germany. And she was interested in accompanying singers, and she was interested in playing the organ, and she was interested in exploring different things. And the school discouraged it. And I just went, oh, that is so short-sighted. You know, this is someone like you who's going to put the work in, right? So it's not a matter of, oh my gosh, she's going to have less hours in the practice room practicing her classical piano as a soloist. No, but like they fail to realize like, well, maybe in playing the organ, it'll improve her solo playing because it's a different perspective. Or maybe in accompanying singers or accompanying instrumentalists, it will add colors to her performance. You know, there's just this fear sometimes of allowing people to explore because somehow that makes them less committed, or somehow that'll mean that their work will suffer. And I do hope moving forward that especially institutions will realize that it's a good thing sometimes if people want to explore, because that will only enrich their performing. And then also, if there is another journey that fits better, it allows them to find it instead of like continuing to put themselves in a box that just doesn't fit.
That's completely right. To me, because you said there's so much work that goes into it. There's so many hours that go into it. At the end of the day, because it is our lives, it has to give something back to you as well, whether it's, you know, the salary and the great job that you were aiming for and the security that it brings, or the joy that it gives you to do something that you're really passionate about, even if it's a harder path or a less distinguished path. Mm-hmm. There's something so violent about the stigmas that we put on some paths of art as opposed to others. Mm-hmm. Who has decided that doing purely the classical arts is the best path? How can we move on from just seeing those strands of art as the most, you know, revered and respected strands of art, when there are so many things that we can do that bring joy to us and to people that experience those art forms? There was for a long time in my mind a fight between, I'm a ballet dancer, it's a classical art, it's so respected, and I want to be doing musical theater, this commercial, half washed out version of being a dancer. And somehow the audience that I perform for now come to the theater with such wide eyes and with such excitement, and they're so thrilled about being a part of that. And it makes me so happy.
Yeah. And
that makes me think, why do we want to stigmatize that? What is the justification behind it?
Yeah.
There's something amazing about these classical arts, and people thrive in them and live to go experience them just as much as any other art form. But what is to say that they're better, or that they're more valuable or more respectable than any other art form?
Yeah. And why can't it be more inclusive? You know, you can go to a rock concert on the weekend and go to the opera during the week. And it doesn't mean, you know, that one is better than the other. They're just different experiences.
Absolutely.
And I know exactly what you mean, because I had the same internal struggle myself, you know, because you're kind of brought up to be an internal snob. And
for sure.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh, but I have this wonderful opportunity. And you know what? If I hadn't taken that opportunity to be part of Phantom in Hamburg, I would have missed out on meeting so many amazing people that I still consider friends. And I was so respected, and I felt appreciated by that creative team. And I go, if I had let my snobbery in my pursuit of this pure art form get in the way, I would have really missed out on a lot of good things in my life.
Absolutely.
But that being said, there is, as we kind of alluded to, a pretty strict discipline when it comes to, any of the classical art forms, and definitely ballet. Have you found that like the discipline that you have in ballet, has that helped you in this transition to, being on the West End and doing 8 shows a week? Has it made it easier for you in some ways?
It's funny because yes, absolutely. And no, it's hindered me a lot in other ways.
Okay.
There's something about, because I went to the Royal Academy of Music for a year to do my master's in arts in musical theater last year. And I was sure that, if I put in the right amount of hours and I practiced all the things I needed to practice and I did all the things I knew I had to do and I applied myself as much as I did in ballet, it would bring me results.
Okay.
And somehow, yes, there's a side of things that's like, if you don't practice, you're not going to get anywhere. But there's also a part of me that was so overcritical because of, these preconceived boxes that I was creating with all that discipline, quote unquote discipline. All of that started to get in my way and made me too self-conscious and made me almost too scared to just open my mouth and sing. And at the end of the day, I'm realizing at the moment actually that I'm allowed to be myself and to be happy with what I put out, even if it's not perfect and even if it's not as good as it will be in 5 years. I can do with what I am and who I am right now, and that will have value in and of itself. So in a way, my discipline is a huge help because it makes it not even a question to practice my exercises and to, do my scales and learn the songs correctly and be attentive to, being very exact with the music and how it's written, etc. But on the flip side of that, I have to remind myself that it's okay to cut myself some slack and just enjoy what I do and just do it because I want to, and not only because it's that day of the week where I have to do this exercise because I didn't do it the day. There's a moment where I have also to let go a little bit and remind myself that it's fine. It's just singing in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things, like, between my moving back to the States and the pandemic and whatever, it's been a very long time since I've performed for an audience, and I miss it. And I know it'll be an adjustment getting back. But that is one of the things that, or probably the only thing I miss about doing 8 shows a week, is it was a reality check, because there's no way to be perfect every time 8 shows a week. And it normalizes performing. You know what I mean? Like, it normalizes it. Like when you're doing an opera production where there's only 5 shows or there's only 8 shows or whatever it is, it's like, oh my gosh, I only have these number of shows to get it right. And there's like so much pressure. And in doing it, for how many years and then doing it 8 times a week, you kind of relax and you see the performance kind of go and ebb and flow, and you realize I can't be perfect all the time. And then when you go see other shows, you also have a little bit more compassion, because like, yes, when you pay money to go see something, you want to see a great performance from people. But if you've done 8 shows a week, there are certain days that you're better and certain days that you're not, and certain days that you're maybe not feeling well, but there's no one to go on for you. And you just have to do your best. And you just pray that the audience has compassion and realizes that you're not a robot,
Right.
So, I miss that perspective, because I do think that like sometimes you just go, oh my gosh, like this one performance, I have to nail everything. And that's just too much pressure, way too much pressure. So after graduating from the Royal Academy, you then have a position now as part of the company of the Phantom of the Opera on the West End. What has that experience been like for you?
I mean, it has been really crazy insane. I remember a bunch of years ago going to watch Cats on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
And in the intermission, they allowed us to go on stage to sort of see the set and take pictures with some of the cast. Which, thinking back during the intermission, who wants to stay on set and just take pictures with the audience? But kudos to them. They were there and they were really gracious. And so I thought to myself, oh, I'm not gonna go up. I'm a theater person. I don't need to know what it's like to be on stage. And then I brought myself to go on, and I looked at the set and I thought, oh, this is really well constructed and whatever. And then I thought, Leroy, you're on a Broadway stage. Turn around and take it in. So I looked at the house, and I stood on that Broadway stage, and I closed my eyes and I thought, I wanna be on a stage like this and be singing on a stage like this. And so when we reopened Phantom on West End last July, on opening night, I stood there at the bows and I thought, I've made it. This is exactly what I had pictured. And having those kind of full circle moments is something that I could never put a price on. Yeah. It's such an incredible experience for me. It's a complete dream come true, and I couldn't wish for a better production to start with in my musical theater life. It's a show that is idolized by so many people. I was so surprised actually joining to see how the audience goes crazy for what we do. And it's such an iconic piece, and it allows me to use what I know how to do best, which for now is ballet, and to utilize it to allow myself to keep learning, from my peers, from my colleagues on stage, and outside I keep taking singing and acting lessons and tap lessons. And so it's been incredible in that regard. And I just want to stress that at university, they told me you learn on the job mostly, and what we teach you now will only make sense once you're doing it. But I had no idea how much I could learn from the people that are around me. Those actresses, dancers are the everybody who's involved in the production, stage management, crew, wardrobe, set, front of house. All these people have such sets of skills, and they're so fascinating people to work with, and I learned so much. And as you said, I'm also so valued because of what I can do and what I bring to the performance. And because we're all so different from one another, and because we each do something so unique within the theater that the production cannot live without, there is a sense of mutual respect and admiration that I have never experienced before. Being sat at the first sing through with the rest of the ensemble and just turning my head right and left and hearing people sing like I had never, well, I probably had already heard people sing like that, but being in the company of so many people with such incredible and diverse and different talent was just, it's humbling. Humbling is a bit of a dumb word, but it's so inspiring because it makes you want to strive for it. And at the same time, it makes you very, very, it made me very proud of having gotten to the place I am now, and to have the skills I have and to be learning from their sets of skills. It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And it's so true. Like, Phantom is a very unique show in the sense that it combines multiple disciplines. So They really do want to cast opera singers. They really do want to cast ballet dancers. They really do want to cast, musical theater people. So it's a hybrid. And we've been kind of touching on this throughout our conversation, but what do you think is to be gained? I actually think sometimes staying in our disciplines and staying in our boxes, like we've been saying, maybe open up those boxes, maybe cross-pollinate between these different genres. You see something like Phantom and you see what happens when you do that. What do you think is to be gained from when we have this kind of play within the genres? I would think we'd only get stronger. What do you think?
I don't think there's a one way forward that doesn't have cross-pollination. I think there's already so much that has been done. There's already such levels of excellence that has been reached in all the art forms. Going forward, there's no way we can make things real and new and exciting unless we create well-rounded pieces of art on stage. And the only way to do that is to have as many inputs as we can. Mm-hmm. It almost feels to me like each of the individual skills and each of the individual fields are sort of growing fields for the finished product, which has to be a combination of everything. I mean, the people that I've been training with, for instance, were also very versed in one thing and not so much in the other. So there were a lot of people that had trained as singers, but that had very little acting experience, or very versed as dancers and not very much singing abilities. And when they started taking what they knew how to do and applying that to things they were learning, and when they took the product of what they had learned and they brought it back to what they knew how to do best, that's when it started cooking on gas, as one of our teachers said. Because all these art forms are really complementary, and there's a great vocal performance doesn't really hit home unless it's supported by great storytelling. And a great storyteller that doesn't really sing well on a musical theater stage will fall a little flat. And there's something dance brings to everyone in the way you use your body to underline what you're saying or singing, or how you develop a character physically. So there's I don't see how there is a way forward without mixing things up and learning from all the art forms out there that you can possibly learn from.
No, I mean, obviously I agree 100%. And, when we're talking about people learning from and exploring other disciplines, it's not to say, all right, so say I'll use myself as an example. I'm an opera singer. That is where my background is. I grew up taking dance. No one is going to hire me as a professional dancer. That's okay. But what it has given me is an awareness of how to use my body. And I realized in being in productions that I picked up the blocking a lot faster than my colleagues.
For sure.
So it's not a dance, but because I kind of was already thinking in those ways of learning a dance routine, or, being aware of where I was going, it helped me in just a simple, okay, I go over there, then I cross here, and I could remember that. It's the same thing of doing theater. And then you get into a situation where you have to introduce your song, or you have to do public speaking. A lot of these things feed complementary skills that you're not even aware of. And again, you don't need to be perfect in everything, but there's something that you can learn that will inform and just add a richness, or as you said earlier in the conversation, which I like, a juiciness to whatever you're putting forth. And then that just makes it more interesting to the audience. Yeah. So as far as moving forward, like we're talking about how, ultimately to move forward, we should take the best of everything and have these inputs to be creative. But like, where do you see performing going? And also why representation is so important with what we're putting forth on stage.
Representation to me is so important because I think life is about compassion and is about identifying yourself with others and recognizing our common humanity. And because to me the arts are about showing an enhanced version of life and an enhanced version of how our lives could be, it's so important for audiences to be able to identify themselves with performers and with the stories that are told. I don't think, especially in today's world where we have so many inputs and informations coming from every direction in such a fast way, there's no way we can go to the theater and see a story that has nothing to do with our lives and receive that message and understand it and be able to go home and think about it and apply it to our lives. So I think having stories that represent what we go through as people in today's world and having performers that look like us on stage, in the broad sense of the term, I'm of very mixed origins myself, so it's a tricky thing for me to feel represented on stage because I'm a big portion white, so seeing white performers I feel represented, but then seeing all black performance I also don't feel represented, although I feel like I'm spoken to in one way. But so if I don't feel like there is somebody who speaks to who I am and who has an experience that is close to mine, there is no way I can really understand the message they're conveying and follow the story they're telling. Mm-hmm. So that's what's really important to me. And so representation for me is almost more important in the stories that are told than the people that are telling them. Because I also want to remember that like we are all capable and all performers are capable of telling a story and of respecting a story and of paying their respects to the people of whose story they're telling. But the stories themselves have to start representing more and more the people who are unheard in our societies, and there are still so many fights out there for equality, for understanding, for compassion that are happening today, that it seems essential to me that these stories are being told moving forward.
I agree. It is representation in the performers on stage, because I went to see the wonderful Audra McDonald in concert last night.
Oh my gosh.
She was talking about a performer that had inspired her, because when she saw her on stage and when she saw her in her work, she could see herself, and then she knew it was possible. Mm-hmm. So there is an importance in that. But there's also, as you said, it cannot just be the representation in the people we cast. It's the representation in the stories that are told. Because when you sit through a story, the wonderful thing that you gain through these experiences is empathy, because you are taken on a journey and you put yourself in another person's shoes and you see through a different set of lenses what someone's life is like. And you can compare it to your own and you find similarities in the journey or the emotions. To that point, people like myself now, I am in some ways a minority and in some ways I'm not. how do we support each other? How do we move forward in a way where we're making room at the table for everybody to sit down? Do you have any ideas in that?
I think a lot of the conversation at the moment around diversity and about inclusion is very matter of fact, and it's a lot about numbers, and it's very cold in a way. And I hope moving forward we can stop trying to tip the balance one way or another by having quotas and saying, oh, we need to cast 75% this or that, or have 50% this or that in the writers that we decide to perform, but have a decision-making process that is based on quality and based on taste, and where it doesn't matter anymore so much what the color of the skin is, or what the gender of the person is, because we listen to all stories equally and decides which one are the most suited to the specific project at hand. And we don't look at casting only people of color, because we look at all performers equally and think who is best suited for this particular job. Mm. I'm not saying that color doesn't matter, and I'm not saying that I don't see color, because it is ginormously important to allow and to celebrate people that are from the global majority today. Mm-hmm. But if it's to the cost of Caucasian people everywhere, that's also not the goal, and that's just shifting completely the balance. And I understand that we need to do that right now to sort of reverse the tendency, but at the end of this laborious work that we're doing together, I hope we can just look at quality and look at efficiency and effectivity, and what is the best solution and what the best decision is for the specific piece of art at hand.
I agree. I think sometimes in the world we forget nuance, and my concern sometimes is you want real change and you don't want it to be trendy. And so I get concerned when certain things seem to be a trend. And I then question, okay, this may be a really positive trend, but are we doing the work to change the system and change the foundation so that, as you said, at some point it balances out and it is about excellence, regardless of where that excellence is coming? And I think some focus should be given at a much more fundamental level as far as, programs and outreach and opportunity.
For sure.
Because part of the problem, the problem isn't just the audition. The problem is getting to the audition.
Absolutely.
And that not everyone, based on their circumstances, is exposed to or has the same opportunities or is
for sure
encouraged. So I think if we can build a stronger foundation, then we can get to a place where we are celebrating not only performers, but varied and diverse stories. And let's just face it, varied and diverse stories are just more interesting. We can't keep...
That's true. That's true.
We can't keep telling the same, story and tropes over and over again. But my hope is, again, that there really is a look at the foundation of things, and that it's not just, and I am a hopeful person, but sometimes I get a little cynical going, is this about real change or is this about optics? And that's my only concern sometimes is let's actually solve this problem, not just put a Band-Aid on it.
For sure. I think as creatives we need to we need to stay vigilant, and we need to keep the higher instances in check, because optics and numbers and quotas are very uncreative things. They aren't the things we are concerned with. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't have the most power over these decisions, but we have the power to keep the people in positions of power in check, and keep making sure our voices are heard and people's voices that matter are heard. And so I completely agree with you. I think that's probably our roles as creatives, as much as it is to be the best at our craft and make sure we're prepared when opportunities come. We also need to keep making sure the people that have power over things that are created hear the voices that need to be heard, and take their decisions and make the change that we want to see with those voices in their head.
Yeah. And I think that we as performers, like, let's face it, it's not always easy. It's not always a straightforward path. I mean, no path in life is straightforward. But to remember that in making space for somebody else and inviting somebody to the table, it doesn't lessen your light or lessen your importance. You can invite someone to the table and include them without fearing, because it's such a competitive place, the arts in general. We don't have to, be afraid that somehow in helping someone that's going to somehow mean that we lose out on something. And that's why I think it's so important for us to focus on collaboration over competition. And that, in supporting each other, we're only going to be stronger, and the cream will always rise to the top, So it'll all turn out the way it's meant to be. And again, we don't need to be cutthroat. And just think of, in making room and in including people, and in having these wider discussions, all of the amazing people and inputs and ideas that you're going to have by just, opening yourself up a little bit more. So I agree. And I think it could be extremely exciting for the arts and how it evolves.
Absolutely. I mean, just to add on to that, that's something I'm discovering every day at the moment, is that what I have to bring to the table is very unique, but it can be very far off the mark of what people on the other side of the table want or need for their project. And so by trying to hinder other people, it's not going to change the fact that what I'm bringing isn't what they need. And if they need is what that other person brings, well, then that's fabulous. And there's nothing I could have done more to make my thing fit their brief. So there's no sense in hindering each other, because at the end of the day, it's such a personal and unique art form. Art is such a specific and personal, walk of life that there's no way. There's actually no real way to say something is better than another, or a person is better than another. And so if that's true, why would we want to hinder people on their path? And because something that doesn't speak to me can speak to someone else, and that's also where representation is, and where diversity is that things that might not be of my particular preference can be somebody else's complete taste, and that's important to recognize and to celebrate as well. I'm not one for hard rock, but it speaks to so many people on so many fundamental and important level that nourishes their soul. So yeah, there's really no reason to try to hinder each other, for sure.
Exactly. I think it comes from a place of fear. And I think, yeah, things are scary sometimes, but that is not necessarily where the energy should be put in.
Absolutely.
Because it's just, there's so many things like we've discussed, there's so many places where you can put your energy, put your energy in exploring, put your energy in learning something new and learning a new craft and putting yourself in a different perspective. Put the energy there, and don't put the energy into feeding something like an insecurity or a fear or an anxiety. Because the way to kill that is to empower yourself. And there are ways that we can do that.
Right. There's something that echoes with me in what you just said. I feel very privileged in a lot of ways. So it's easy for me to say, well, if I don't get this opportunity, I can get the next one. It's not always that easy. Sometimes you have things riding on the line that are very important and that are very, life-threatening. So I completely understand that. I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I am, to be able to look at the opportunities and say, well, if this one wasn't for me, it's for someone else, and I'm happy for them. But that is absolutely also because I'd rather try to make myself the best version of myself as I can, rather than putting my life power into making other people's life miserable. So everything is to be taken with a pinch of salt always, and I try to remind myself of that.
Well, it is always a joy talking to you. I think we've hit everything. We've hit philosophy. We've hit, learning more about you as a person and as a performer. I love talking about I think we share a very mutual vision of where the arts can go. So it always leaves me feeling very, very inspired. For people who want to learn more about you and find you and follow you and your adventures, where should they look for you?
They can find me on Instagram and on Twitter under Leeroy Boone or Boone Leeroy, but I'm pretty unique because Leeroy takes 2 E's, so you'll probably find me, and I'm sure you'll put the correct link in the description of this podcast.
Yes.
So yeah, they're very welcome to follow me. I try on my social media to learn as much as I can about the issues that are important to me. AI, feminism, and diversity, and representation, and trans and queer issues. So I try to share the things that I find interesting and that teach me, and I try to stay juicy. I try to stay interested and juicy. So I try to share that with the people that follow me on these platforms.
That's wonderful. So as he said, everything will be in the show notes, so you can find all the information about Leeroy. Thank you so much for this conversation today, and looking forward to everything that you have coming up in the future.
Thank you, Corinne, and same with you. And I look forward to keep the discussion open to discover and learn more about all these things that we touched on today.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Create Outside the Box. Please follow us, like, and subscribe on Spotify, Buzzsprout, and now Apple Podcasts. And check us out on our Creative Operations YouTube channel, where you can subscribe to watch our interviews. For more information about Creative Operations, please visit www.creative-operations.org.